Hey artists, today we're going to start a portrait sculpture. Portrait is something I have always struggled with, and I struggled so much that I started a sculpture and I tore it up. This is the female figure I'm doing, but before this, I got so frustrated that I put another sculpture in a bag. So wait until the end of this video and I'll show you that sculpture. So I have some reference up. It's an Asian woman. I do struggle a lot with proportions and portrait sculptures, and I've done quite a few, but the likeness always eludes me. So I'm trying my best to do more portraits so I can zone in on this because I really love portrait sculpture, but it's always been a very difficult thing for me. I know most people already know about the human proportions. The midway are the eyes, you can divide the face into thirds. I'm not going to go into this yet because I need so much practice, but eventually in the future I'll be making a video with that in mind. So for this one I have my reference up, and because I am white I have very different facial features, and a lot of times I find myself putting my own facial features onto my subjects, which is completely understandable because you're much more familiar with your own face than anybody else's face. So I do like finding different ethnic groups and sculpting them because it puts you out of your comfort zone. And doing a human, for example, other than like a comic book, it makes you really focus on doing a actual rendition as opposed to something you can exaggerate. And with the human body and with the human face, there's just so much to it. Of course, the eyes on an Asian model are very different than mine, and I have to keep going back and forth with it. And females are so much more difficult than males because their faces are much more subtle. So with the Asian face, everything's a lot flatter. The features are smaller, the mouth is smaller, the nose is not long like mine. It's very difficult to do. But the more I push myself, the more I can do it. It's very easy to give in to frustration. And, you know, when I look at artists and I know that they're struggling, like I can totally relate to it. I think it takes me a long time, especially portraits, to really get comfortable. But my technique usually becomes a little time consuming. So I do like going by that standard way of measuring, like the midway would be the eyes, and you can divide it in thirds. But often I make so many mistakes with portrait. So one of the mistakes I also made was putting the armature on a PVC pipe. You can see it moving quite a bit, so I have to use my other hand to steady it. The real way of doing it is to put it on a cast iron rod from a plumbing department, and that's a much better way. I wanted to give a suggestion for the lower body here, and I'm going to use a very big tool to do it. So getting some last minute details on the eyes, making the pupil just a little bit bigger, and then closing it up. I also don't mind the flatness of it. So here I decided that my head was a little bit too scrunched up, so I added a little bit more skull to the top. And this happens a lot, sometimes the clay itself, being water clay, kind of moves around. And there we go. That paint scraper, that's something I'm going to be using towards the end of the video. And for the back, I'm not that concerned with the back just yet. I do like to abstract parts that are not part of the emphasis. The emphasis is really on the face. And of course, I like the sternocleidomastoid, the clavicle on her because she's a very thin model, kind of stands out quite a bit. That sternum stands out, the rib cage, the first few ribs stand out, but I don't want to put too much detail on there. Doing the ears, I will put a little bit more detail, but not that concerned with that either. A lot of times, things like this just kind of fall into place once you get the right image. And of course, you can make it a little bit smaller. The tragus, the ear hole, it's pretty much midway to the back. Usually, if from the tragus, it's just a little bit more. But the way you take this measurement for the midway is about the nasal bone, not actually the nose tip. Because if you were to do that on my face, for example, my nose is so much longer that it would give you inaccurate measurements. I'm eventually going to reduce the ear and just taking this cloth and removing a lot of the detail and then going over with this brush. This is one of the first brushes I'm using that's flat. Most of the other ones are rounds. I love my silicone tools, especially the flat one. I wish it was a little bit stiffer, but this paint scraper, I wanted to create the bottom half just using the paint scraper because that's going to give me an abstract type of look, a loose look. And I love the idea of having a realistic head and drifting off the details towards the bottom. That's something that a lot of the 19th century artists also did. I also wanted to use the paint scraper on the hair towards the back, make it a little bit more abstract. You can tell like the way the clay is behaving right now. It's beautiful. It's like oil painting. It's just very flowy. You don't get this sort of thing in oil-based clay. This is a just a water-based clay sort of consistency. It's very hard to describe. It feels great when you're sculpting, and not a lot of people use water clay these days, but it is a really beautiful medium. Very inexpensive medium, and you can find clay like this everywhere. So I just want to put some final details. I haven't scooped in or scooped the head out. It is kind of hollow because I do have the pipe. So the pipe inside actually acts as a way of hollowing it out because I should be able to kind of pop the top of the head and remove the top part of the PVC pipe and then just lift up the sculpture and let it dry. So I wanted to create just a little bit more hair as it goes over the shoulder. And then I'm going to hit it again with my paint scraper and give it just some direction to the hair. Not interested in creating detail. This is more of a study. I don't want to get too involved with the details. And I do love the idea of the quick sketch. I love the idea of seeing quick sketches from various sculptors. It gives you a lot more of an insight into the artist's mind than the finished works. Even with sculptors like Bernini, there's a little bit lost in the marble sculptures. Like when you look at his clay versions, the maquettes for the originals, I really like those quite a bit more because you see the artist's thoughts in there. It is annoying the PVC pipe moving around, but I think one of the reasons I use the PVC pipe is that it doesn't rust. It's just a very easy way of removing the clay from the armature. I could use a much thicker PVC pipe and that would create a little bit more stabilization, but it seems to work out good enough. At this point, I was like, okay, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to put a flower on her head. I struggled with type of flower I was going to put, and it might be over the top, but I kind of felt like it needed something on that left side. I did decide maybe I should put it on the left, and then I looked at it and it looked a little bit off balance. So, and flowers are very difficult to sculpt. I was at the National Gallery and I saw Rodin, and he had a portrait of a girl, and that's something that he did. He put flowers in the heads quite a bit, and they were just very loose clay, blobs in there, and he made it really realistic, just with a few blobs of clay. So that's how a virtuoso would do it. For me, I'm just stumbling around trying to make sense. Well, we're coming to the end of the sculpture. Portrait sculpture has always been very difficult for me, but I'm learning things every day, and pretty soon I'll add a few more of these up if you guys are interested. I really appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.